Okay, this is part 3 of my best Great American Bash matches. So I was talking about the Rey Mysterio Eddie Guerrero matchup. That was 14. This is now moving on to 13. It was a fatal from the Great American Bash 2004 fatal four-way matchup for the U.S. title between John Cena, RVD, Booker T, and Rene Dupree. Really, this was a good matchup. It wasn't great. There was some botched spots in some botched spots in this matchup, and there was some miscommunication in this matchup. But still, this was a good, entertaining matchup for what it was, and it proved that the WWE was. It proved why John Cena was just. It proved why the WWE was gonna put John Cena as one of their top guys in the WWE as soon as he dropped the U.S. title, and it proved how underrated Booker T is and RVD, and as well as Rene Dupree. Although, like I said, wasn't that great of a matchup, but in a way, it was still a good, entertaining matchup for what it was, which saw John Cena win the match after giving, I believe it was Booker T the FU and retaining his title. But still, very good matchup. Really enjoyed it. Wasn't great, but still it was good for what it was. Good, entertaining matchup, and it did what it was supposed to do, and that was just to establish John Cena as a future superstar in the making, and that's what this match did. Number 12 is from the Great American Bash 2007, which was for the ECW title rematch. Well, yeah, for the ECW title, I believe it was CM Punk versus John Morrison, I believe, and these two put on a really good matchup, and it was just a sign of things to come between these two, because these two would have a series of matches against each other where Punk would try to win the title off of John Morrison, but he would always end up coming short, and that was no exception in this matchup. These two just proved in this matchup why this match just proved why these two were going to be future main eventers, and why John Morrison was a star in the making, and why the WWE is pushing him now. It also proved how good of a workers these two were. Proved how much good chemistry these two had, and it was just a very good matchup, which I enjoyed, and it was just a sign of things to come, as these two just have a rivalry from that part of 2007. So moving on to number 11, it was the Great American Bash 2006, same pay-per-view. Well, the year before, 2006, which was for the WWE Tag Team titles. It was Paul London, Brian Kendrick versus the Pitbulls. Really not a great matchup, but still it was a good matchup. A lot of high-flying moves, a lot of just good, innovative tag team match in here. And the Pitbulls consisted of Jamie Noble and Kid Cash. For some of you who don't know who the Pitbulls were at the time, that's who the teams were. And these two teams just showed why they were very good teams, and why they're very underrated workers. And it also showed why Paul London and Brian Kendrick were very underrated as a tag team as well, and why it should have got better treatment than what they got in the WWE at the time. But still, very good matchup. Highly enjoyed it. Highly, and that's one of the reasons why I got it in number 11. Number 10 is the matchup, the Great American Bash from last year, which was between Matt Hardy versus Shelton Benjamin. Really not that great of a matchup, but still very good, entertaining matchup. Matt Hardy worked his ass off in this matchup. He made Shelton Benjamin look like $1 million. Shelton Benjamin also made Matt Hardy look like $1 million, meaning these two held their own in this matchup. Even though it wasn't that great of a matchup, it was still good for what it was. In the end, though, Shelton Benjamin ended up hitting the payoff on Matt Hardy, and thus he would become your new U.S. champion. And this match just proved why Shelton Benjamin should be one of the main eventers in the WWE, and why he should be getting a bigger push than what he's getting now, what he was getting back then, and why he should get a bigger push now, even though he's been jobbing a lot lately. But still, very good matchup. One of the reasons why I put it on here. Number 9, I got the Great American Bash from 2005. It was Booker T versus Christian. This was a good matchup. These two showed why they had good chemistry against each other. You also added in the fact that Sharmell was involved in this feud, and these two just put on really good matches against each other. In my opinion, way better than the TNA matches these two had against each other, but that's just me. And it just proved why Christian was underrated worker and why he should have got pushed more than what he got in the WWE at the time, and why Booker T was a very underrated worker. But still, very good matchup. Highly enjoyed it, and one of the reasons got it at number 9. Number 8 comes from us from the Great American Bash 1989 for the WCW TV title. It was Sting versus the Great Muta. These two had some better matches like at Starrcade, but still, this was a good matchup for what it was. Although there was some time, the timing in this match was sort of off. It was still a very good matchup. Sting put his working boots on, Great Muta showed up, and these two were able to work their two styles that they wrestled against each other, and just highly enjoyed this matchup. One of the reasons why I put it on here. Number 7 featured a Great American Bash between one future Hall of Famer and then a Hall of Famer in his own, Ric Flair and Randy Savage. These two wrestled against each other, although it wasn't as good as their matches that they had in the WWE, whether it was WrestleMania 8 or the match that they had like a couple days after WrestleMania 8. But still, it was a good matchup, and these two just showed why they had so much good chemistry and whenever these two wrestle against each other, and that's why I got it on here. Number 6 is the Great American Bash 1988 for the NWA World Title. Ric Flair versus Lex Luger. Very good matchup. Ric Flair made Lex Luger look like $1,000,000, like one of the greatest superstars in the world. Lex Luger held his own. He pulled off some innovative moves that you really didn't see him use in the later part of the 90s, and really just a very good matchup, which showed how good of a worker Ric Flair was and what kind of a promising star Luger was. And in the end, Ric Flair ended up retaining, but still, this was a very good matchup, and it just showed what Ric Flair can do to a worker that was kind of not as good as him. Just showed what Ric Flair can do. Number 5 is the Great American Bash 1996, Chris Benoit versus Kevin Sullivan. Really, this was a very good feud, which led to a really good matchup at this pay-per-view. It was a false count anywhere matchup. These two beat the hell out of each other, and these two, it showed their hatred towards each other outside of WCW. Really showed in this matchup, and you saw some really good moves and spots in this matchup, and you also saw a real good swerve in this matchup when Arn Anderson turned on Kevin Sullivan and they laid the Horseman beat down. But still, very good matchup and highly enjoyed it. One of the reasons why I got it at number 5. Number 4 is from the Great American Bash 1996 between Dean Malenko and Rey Mysterio. These two put on a real good matchup, and it just shows why Dean Malenko is a very underrated worker and why Rey Mysterio doesn't get as much credit as he should. Number 3 is Booker T versus Chris Benoit, the final matchup in their Best of 7 series. This was a very good matchup. This was one of the reasons why most people started tuning into WCW to the later part, because of this rivalry. Booker T and Chris Benoit just let it hang out there, and they put on a fantastic matchup, which showed why these two should have got pushed more than what they got, and why Chris Benoit was a very underrated worker in WCW and didn't get as much credit as he should have. But overall, very good matchup. One of the reasons why I got it at number 3. Number 2, Dustin Rhodes versus Ric Flair for the NWA World Heavyweight Title. Very good matchup, and Ric Flair sold a lot for Dusty Rhodes. Dusty Rhodes held his own, and overall, very good matchup. Finally, from the Great American Bash 1990, Ric Flair versus Sting for the NWA World Heavyweight Title. Very good matchup, a lot of emotion, as many people didn't think Sting would beat Ric Flair, but he somehow managed to. And Ric Flair also made Sting look like $1,000,000, and this was the match that Ric Flair turned Sting into a star, and Sting's stock just rise after that. But overall, very good matchup, and like I said before about Ric Flair, just showed how good of a worker Ric Flair was and how much he loved putting people over and making new stars. And the story as well going into this matchup was a very good story and just a very highly enjoyable matchup. And I recommend people who haven't seen this check it out to see what I'm talking about. Till then, this is my final video for Great American Bash. Peace. I'm out.